Guys, I've been wanting to show y'all the test bench for quite some time now. I'm sure I'm gonna miss some of the details, maybe some of the things you guys would like to know. Feel free to ask me some questions. There's a lot of little details to this thing that I'm probably gonna miss, and to keep this video from being super long, I'll probably miss some of those details, maybe on purpose, maybe not. But so first off, I do this out in my garage. You can kind of see there's those Scar 12s, by the way. We'll talk about that here in a second, how we get over there. But this is it. I ended up just hanging up a Harbor Freight moving blanket, and I thought it made for a pretty cool backdrop. And so yeah, I do this out here in my garage. Now one day, maybe here in the near future, I don't know, but one day I may move this bench into the house and have a dedicated space in the house for all of this type of stuff. And so it may not stay out here in the garage forever. That would be kind of nice to get in some air conditioning and some heat one day, because out here in the summer it's really hot and in the winter it's really cold. So that's kind of my goal, is to get this inside one day. I may still use the camo blanket as a backdrop even when we go inside, who knows. All right, so let's start off. I thought about a test bench for a long time. I couldn't decide. I thought about getting all different kinds of little carts and toolboxes and all different types of things. And I saw this at Walmart one week, and man, I just started brainstorming at what I could do with it. But this was like a portable rolling clothes rack, I guess. And you could it was made where you could hang clothes from it, and then it had a couple of shelves that you could put wherever you want. But see, it's on wheels, and I like that it was portable. And I just kept thinking about how I could do these shelves, and I'm trying to think right now too. I reconfigured these top pieces, and what I did was I needed a third shelf, because I wanted my main area for viewing and my battery on the bottom, and then up top I wanted to put my head unit. And so this is Baltic birch, by the way, the good stuff, and it's only 1/4 inch. So is this one, and so is that one, but this is actually Baltic birch 1/4 inch that I bought 2 whole pieces of it for a completely different project. And so oddly enough, that is Baltic, the real stuff that comes from Russia. It wasn't even on purpose that I bought it for this test bench, but I needed to make this top part where I could make a shelf out of this, because it was just these 2 bars across here. So I got these U-bolts, cut me a piece, and made me a third shelf. So that's the 3 shelves. These other 2 are the wire. See, they were supposed to just be wire shelves, but I cut a piece of birch that would sit right down in there, and they sit there just perfect. Okay, so just wanted y'all to know right up front what this thing is, and what it started out life as. I bought it specifically for this bench. It's not like I bought it and we used it for clothes for a while and then I converted it to this. I specifically bought it to make this test bench. But in thinking of all the different types of test benches, this one was going to be a lot more useful for me and how I wanted to use it than using some kind of rolling cart or toolbox or something. And I think that turned out to be 100% truth. So let's start down here with the power. We'll get to this in a second. But over here on the left, so I've got a 4 banks of the Yinlongs, and so these are the 40 amp hour, 2.3 volts. They really max out at 2.7. You can go all the way up to 16.4 volts on these when they're charged at 100%. And I don't ever go to 100%, so I'm not ever really using the full capacity of these things. But when I started doing the amp dynos last June, so about 14 or 15 months ago now, I only had 1 bank. And so here's 4 banks, 1, 2, 3, 4. I only had 1 bank. And then I upgraded to 2 banks. And I've had 2 banks for the last year or so. And then just recently I added 2 more. And I've bought the Jim's Machine Works bus bars every single time. So now I now have a spare set of bus bars for 1 bank of these batteries, and another spare set of bus bars for if you had 2 banks. And so I've bought a lot of these things from Jim's Machine Works now, and not even using 2 of them. But these batteries are awesome. Really, really awesome. I went straight to these right out of the gate. I never did get like the excess power 14 volt batteries. We use some excess power batteries. I've got one in my old pickup truck, and my son's got 2 of them in his Tahoe. We love those batteries. But as far as my test bench goes here, I started with the lithium. This, by the way, fits perfectly in this heart crate that I bought at Walmart. I mean, it goes from side to side and front to back just perfectly. I couldn't ask for that to sit in there any better. All these little bars are for the balancer. I keep the balancer in a little bag that's zip tied closed, and it just kind of sits down there loosely. I have double runs. By the way, I'm wanting to cover these probably all 4 of these zeros with TechFlex, because it does bother me a little bit that one of my zeros for positive is black and one of them is blue. But I do have the heat shrinks in blue for the positives, and then black heat shrinks for the negatives. But I've got double runs of zeros coming up here to the distribution blocks. And let's come around here. I have mounted, I've got the Power Max 100 amp power supply. I do have the adjustable. I mounted this on the outside of this box just recently, and I mounted it where I could get to the screws right here easily instead of being on the bottom. So I can adjust the voltage on this. This one goes all the way up to, what does it go up to? It goes up pretty high. I can get to 16.5 on here, which is perfect, because if I wanted to top these out at 16.4, I can. And I do often run, I do normally have this plugged in when I'm doing an amp dyno. Even if I'm doing a small amp and the battery itself is plenty enough, I normally plug it in anyway. So this power wire just stays right here, kind of hanging there like that until I'm ready to plug it up, and I run it off of an extension cord coming off over here to the side. So here's those 4 zeros. So this is my positive distribution block and my negative distribution block. So for the longest time, I just had 1 zero on each. I just recently did the 2 extra runs when I added the 2 extra banks down there. But these are Steve Mead terminals, distribution blocks, and I love them. We use them in my son's Tahoe as well. In fact, these used to be in his Tahoe. and he wanted to go a different route and do something different, just a different configuration. And he didn't have a need for them anymore, so I bought these from him. So the reason you see all these wires, I didn't really start off this way, but I've tried to make my test bench as convenient and modular as possible. And so what I have here is, I seem to use these two 4 gauges the most. I don't know why, but a lot of the amps I end up testing are 4 gauge. So, but anyhow, you can see I'm using all these screws, and a couple of them are doubled up, but these things are really heavy duty. But I've got 4 gauge with ferrules ready to go at any time. And then if you look at these, this is going to be an 8 gauge. Both of these are 10s. One of this has a ferrule, one of it has a fork terminal. Same thing for the other side. So whatever kind of amp I'm sticking up here, I've probably already got a power and ground sitting here ready to go, so that every time I do an amp, I'm not switching out wires. That way I can make it quick and easy. I keep the ends of them taped up with painter's tape. I don't know, it works great for me. Just like how I tried to make this convenient, so did the sorry about that, the resistive loads. I also wanted to do the resistive loads very conveniently. And number one, I wanted to have a lot of power for my resistive loads. So this is when I'm doing 1 ohm, and I can do a lot of power here, because here's 6. These are 1,000 watts a piece, and there's 2 more under here right by the distribution blocks. You can see right here I've got an 8 gauge that's already coming off of that, and then here's the other ends of that 8 gauge ready to go into the speaker outputs of an amplifier. So I've got 8 1,000 watt resistors that'll go to 1 ohm, because they're all run right here, all the positives and all the negatives. And I'm pretty sure, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, that'll do 1,000 watts a piece continuous. And when you're doing a test like I am, I could probably test, I don't know, double or triple the power that these are rated for. I've never had an amp that big. But those are all permanently mounted, and I don't know, really cool. And then over here is 4 more of them, and I typically use this when I'm wanting to use a big wire like this. Actually, I'll use this same wire, and I'll just take these loose and I'll put them on here, and I'll use this for my 2 and 4 ohm loads. So if I'm doing 4 ohm, I'll take 2 of these loose. And if I'm doing a 2 ohm, I have them all hooked up like they are right now, and I just switch those wires from there to there. If I'm doing a really small amp, I use these resistors. So these are 8 ohms a piece as well, and there's 8 of those. So this will also go all the way to 1 ohm by itself, but they're 200 watts a piece. So what is that, 1,600 watts that those are rated for? So I can do a decent size amp on these. I started out with these resistors before I bought these braking resistors, but I already have the wires here for the smaller. If I'm doing a small amp that has little bitty terminals, like here's for the ferrules, and then there's also attached for forks. And I can change up the configuration here to do series and parallel and whatever ohm load I want to do down here. So I'm either using those resistors, or those resistors on all of my tests. So I have run a dedicated 8 gauge. I use almost all sky high wire. It runs up here to this fuse block, and this is, you see I've got fuses in there, and it runs the head unit and the LED light up here. This is how I turn my light on and off. And my my volt gauge. And you can see here's my remote wire. And I put it on this switch. So I love having this all set up on a switch panel like this. So I've done a good job with tidying up all my wires as much as possible and making it, you know, neat and clean. This is a SPL Lab voltmeter, and that thing is super awesome. Smart voltmeter. It does a lot of cool stuff, but the way that it will hold the lowest voltage is what I wanted out of that. But I can change a whole lot of things in here for when I want it to hold that. You can raise it all the way up to a pretty high voltage or a pretty low voltage. But I have enjoyed the crap out of that thing. It's awesome. The head unit that I use here is the Kenwood XDC X304. That is an awesome head unit. It always has the SMD disc in it ready to go for the 40 hertz and 1K and all that. And I have a thumb drive that stays plugged in here with all the other tracks, the YouTube tracks. I've got a bunch of rusticles on there and just some other stuff as well. And what I do is I run a RCA bass knob. So when I'm turning up the volume on an amp, this is what I'm doing. So the RCA comes out of the head unit into here and then out of here. And it's one of my wires right here that's hanging down. And I plug that into my amp. And so this is always on the max clean volume. And then when I'm rolling up an amp, I'm rolling up this bass knob. So with this thing being portable, one thing that's cool about it is after I've tested an amp and I'm ready to go put it on those 212s, then I just roll it from here back into here and hook it up to these 212s. And I've got these wires right here always ready to go. And I can change the configuration here as well between whether that's series and parallel, or if I'm doing one sub or two subs. But anyhow, there's one of my dogs. That's Bella. And then over here is Oakley. Really good dogs. Y'all hear them a lot of times in the videos. But guys, that's really it. I know I'm probably skipping over some stuff, but that's the way that I have all this set up, and it works so well. Oh, I got a magnetic. So a lot of I usually adjust my gains and all that with a little steel screwdriver. I know that it's not plastic, but yeah, so if I'm using nut driver, screwdriver, whatever, I can easily just attach it right here. Here's the little 8-inch that I use occasionally as well in my videos. But guys, that is it. You might have found this video really interesting or really boring, but either way, I appreciate you for watching. And don't hesitate to ask me some questions about this thing. I will be more than happy to answer your questions. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again. Please consider subscribing. Thanks for the support, and stay tuned for next week's video. Bye. All right, guys, a few more things. I went back and watched my video. I saw several mistakes and just several things that I left out that I want to go back and clear up. We'll just go down the list. Here's the list. Speaker wires. So these are speaker wires coming right out of the head unit. In case I ever want to do anything with just the speaker wires coming off of a head unit, like I did in those tests for the LOCs. So I have those right here on a terminal strip, just easy, ready to go. Like I said, everything about this test bench, I tried to make it modular, simple, convenient, and it's taken a lot of time and effort to get everything that way, but boy, does it make a difference. Terminal strip. I've even got, it was tucked away over here where I keep it, but with all my positives and negatives that I have ready to go, I've even got a little terminal strip here You would have seen that in some of my LOC videos, but here's a positive and negative just ready to go at all times, as well as all these wires that are ready to go. The hanging wires, I didn't talk about all the wires that were hanging off the back here, but it's just all the different, this is to go into the back of this box right here. But I got the big terminals, little terminals. The big terminals are for these 1000 watt resistors, and then the little terminals are for the little, the small resistors there. So I, one by one, as I started doing each amp, I just was having to make up wires every time for all the different configurations. I was not prepared for how many different configurations that I would need. But in the process, I would end up just making up a wire and keep it. And it's very rare nowadays for me to test an amp that I don't have wires just ready to go. Boy, that's been nice ever since I got to that point. The plastic bin, we didn't even talk about the plastic bin. I've got all kinds of random stuff in here. Extra parts, extra RCAs. There's extra wires in there. Just a lot of stuff. A lot of this type of stuff was in there. These, let's see, I've got 0 to 4 and 4 to 8, and then what were these? 8 to 10, I don't know, but I've got all these little reducers. That's pretty nice to have. 0 gauge, I talked about all these wires, and of course sometimes I do amps that take 0 gauge inputs for the power and ground, and so here they are. So I do typically keep these in the bin, and when I need them, I do screw them onto here instead of leaving them up here at all times. But if anybody was wondering, well, hey, does he not ever use 0 gauge? Yes, of course I do. I talked about my power bank, and I just referred to them as yin longs, and that is what they are. But specifically, they're the excess power yin longs. This was a bad one that I received. It came with only 0.4 volts. It's still that way. I'll be honest with you. I haven't ever charged it up to see if it'll hold. But it's the only yin long I've ever received that was, a lot different than the rest of them. All the other was come in, at around that 2.3, give or take a tenth or two, pretty much fully charged is what, the way they come to you. And this one was a lot different. So I didn't even take a chance with it. I didn't even put it in one of the banks. I just went ahead and ordered another one. And so I sort of have this one laying around, but I never have used it. But yeah, they're the excess power yin longs, the 2.3 volts, 40 amp hours. I spoke about charging these to 16.4. I don't want anybody to be thinking that I'm charging these individually to 16.4. When you have 6 of these in series, you can charge them up to a max of 16.4. And when they're charged to that, they're at 100%. And so these are all series, and that gives you your 16.4 with just one bank, but that would be just 40 amp hours. I also didn't mention that this is 160 amp hours. So as you go in series, you go up on your voltage, and then as you parallel them together, you add capacity. So you go from 40 amp hours to 80, 120, 160. So that's what I have there. What's next? Oh, this was funny. I was talking about these little wires, and I called them little bars. That's funny. But these wires across here are for the balancer. It's ideal to have a balancer on these batteries so that they'll stay balanced at all times. With all these different cells, you want them to all stay balanced. 4 gauge for power supply. We talked about all these wires over here, but I didn't talk about that I'm using a 4 gauge to go from my power supply to the lithium. This is a 100 amp power supply, and this 4 gauge little short run of 4 is plenty. And more than that, I use 4 because that's all that it'll accept. If it would have accepted a 0, I would have put a 0 on it. But I've never had any issues with that 4 gauge not being enough. The power resistors, or the power of my resistors. I think I spoke about how they could handle like double or triple what they're rated. My 1 ohm load here between these 6 and these 2 more is 8,000 watts. And I talked about how I could do double or triple that. What I mean by that is when I'm doing an amp dyno and I turn it up all the way, it only stays there for about 1 or 2 seconds. And that's why I say that you could test such a big amp on those. And to be honest, I've never had an 8,000 watt amp on the test bench yet. But when, you know, kind of like the power handling of a subwoofer, you know, if you go up, you know, for short periods of time, yeah, that speaker could handle a good bit more than what it's rated. Same thing with these. So I'm not talking about I could do double or triple the power on these resistors and just leave it that way for several minutes. But turning it up for 1 or 2 seconds, oh yeah, they'll handle a lot. I don't see myself ever needing any more resistors than what I've got. I've got lots of resistors. If one goes out, I'll just replace it, but I don't plan on buying any more resistors. And then cost. I didn't talk about the cost of all this, and I certainly won't be able to get specific with you, but I will tell you this, and all of this was over time. I would not have been able to spend this kind of money all at once, but this test bench is easily somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 if you add everything together. I mean, there's $2,000 worth of lithium right there. And I haven't even shown the AMM1, the clamp for amperage, the DD1. Oh boy, I've got the IMSG. I got this crossover calibrator. Lord have mercy. All of those things are worth quite a bit. So easily $4,000. It might actually be more like $5,000. So if you plan on getting into this, that's probably what you could expect to spend. But anyhow, I believe I've cleared up everything I wanted to clear up now. And so anyhow, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more, and please consider subscribing. Thanks again. Bye.